In deep dive number 7, we saw that the core of the self is basically a chaotic collage of images, but probably in Victoria Heuermann's case, not the images highlighted by John Ray. In this analysis, part 3 of 3 from number 8, we're going to finally answer the question, what actually pushed or propelled the Long Island serial killer into action? Was it sadism or was it porn?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime.
Can we just forget the past? That woman deserves her revenge.
You create a being who is so deprived, so walled up and pushed back on himself, so inept at reaching out, so short-circuited, whose nerve fibers are attracted to things hard, angular and cold. Right, like the edifices of buildings like Manhattan, whose insides are such an empty echo chamber of denial that in order for this organism to sense in some massively clumsy way a sense of vital expansion, to be psychically healed, to begin to go on those walks somehow without existential anxiety, to flush away the deprivation, it would take nothing less than the destruction of the entire planet. And really what we're dealing with here is someone who has had his insides hollowed out. He's so deprived in terms of his own life experience. It feels like he's been hemorrhaging. It feels like he has been literally disemboweled, right? In a psychological sense. And so is it really such a surprise that in the circle of time, when it comes full circle, that is how he obviously manifests it on his world. And it's really about him getting revenge on what was done to him. Now, I know what you're thinking. Haven't we lost the plot? What does any of this have to do with aggression? Well, if you've been paying careful attention, it's got everything to do with that very nasty, unhealthy kind of pent-up aggression called compensatory aggression. By the way, have you heard that term anywhere else? Ever? Have you heard that term mentioned anywhere in terms of the conversations around Rex Heuermann? Anywhere, on any other channel? Or are you hearing it here for the first time? And this brings us back to the question we asked at the outset.
Which brings us at last to the moment of truth wherein the fundamental flaw is ultimately expressed and the anomaly revealed as both beginning and end.
There is no doubt there is aggression at work here, monumental aggression, but what activates it? Some undisclosed period of time passes and then the aggression is there. What releases it? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Thank you very much for your comments and thoughts. I think this has been very interesting and illuminating to some of you. So thank you very much for that. If you're enjoying this analysis, part 3 of number 8, there are 2 to go, then please, again, just like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started.
Can we just forget the past? That woman deserves her revenge.
We'll circle back to this topic of revenge at the end of this episode. But first, remember we asked a moment ago, what's really at the wheel in Heuermann's body and mind? Actually, it's not a moment ago. We asked it in part 1 of episode 8, right? What is activating the Long Island serial killer suspect? What is kind of initiating him? Not what's triggering him, what is actually allowing him to kind of cross that line, right? And I mean, to me, the trigger, the thing that basically said, I've got an opportunity now, was basically a combination of his mother and wife leaving him, right? I think that was a trigger right in the beginning. And so what do you think it is? What do you think is actually activating him to cross over the first time into criminality, but also subsequently? What do you think it is, sadism or impulsivity? Now, sadism seems to be the obvious answer, doesn't it? But I'm not sure it is, even though I've been making the case that sadism is a huge factor here.
I'm sure you do feel a little bit of both. But I know damn well that you feel one more than you feel the other. The question was, which one is it?
Sadism or impulsivity? Sadism seems to be the obvious answer, doesn't it? But I'm not sure it is, even though I've been making the case that sadism is a huge factor here. Now, haven't we underestimated impulsivity? If you say impulsivity, well, impulsivity from where? From what? How? Now, by impulsivity, we don't mean a thing of acting without thinking. It's more a behavior pattern that starts in the brain. Now, what sort of behavior pattern is going on in Heuermann's brain that we're already well aware of that leads to impulsivity? And what we're really talking about is almost a condition where you are acting almost on autopilot, almost automatically, right? And think about, it's related to addiction. So what addiction did Heuermann have, and that may lead to impulsivity in terms of that addiction, because it literally is in terms of that addiction. And so what you have is a very interesting contradiction. You've got a very controlled individual, a very tightly caged in, rules-based, rigid person who in one particular area of his life is completely breaking those rules and crossing those lines, and not only addicted but impulsively gratuitous in that addiction, in that one little area. Which area are we talking about? Are you seeing what we're getting at? And now allow me to direct your attention to a peer-reviewed study published on the Science Direct platform and apparently co-authored by Chinese researchers. I'll put a link to that study in the description. The study is titled Aggressive Behaviors in Highly Sadistic and Highly Impulsive Individuals. That's exactly what we're looking for. We're trying to look at the correlation between aggressive behaviors in sadistic people and highly impulsive individuals and try and see which individual Heuermann fits into. And the long and short of it is the research showed sadism connected to proactive aggression. That's yet another definition that you might not be familiar with, right? Sadism connected to proactive aggression, while impulsivity is connected to reactive aggression. What does that mean? Well, if we're dealing with compensatory aggression, which of these falls into this category in terms of proactive and reactive aggression? Well, I guess we first need to find out what we're talking about. What is proactive aggression? Proactive aggression is also called or referred to as instrumental aggression. It's goal-directed behavior. It's designed to achieve a specific objective, right? So if you think about someone who mugs a person, right? Someone who attacks another person, the objective isn't physical violence. The objective is actually robbery. The objective is stealing something. So it's proactive, goal-directed behavior involving aggression, involving violence, but it's actually very assertive. It's, I'm doing this in order to get that outcome. Do you think that's what we're dealing with Rex Heuermann? Because the alternative is what's called reactive or hostile aggression. And that's where the perpetrator's got a bone to pick with his victim or with society, and he's reacting to something that's been laid down previously. And that's done in response to provocation. And I think the question is, well, are we talking about provocation that happened a moment ago or provocation in the past? Which, I mean, bullying is a kind of provocation. And so isn't reactive aggression a broad form of retaliation, a form of revenge?
That woman deserves her revenge.
If you really want to absorb this concept of revenge, watch the movies Kill Bill and Kill Bill 2. It really totally ingratiates one in that theme, that subject matter, right? And you can ask yourself, is it true, if you were in her position, Beatrix Kiddo, would you want revenge for what was done to you? Would you feel the same way? I'm certainly not justifying any of what Heuermann did, certainly none of the, specific violence towards women. What I'm asking is, would it be natural to feel feelings of wanting revenge and wanting retaliation? And I can tell you, I was bullied at school, in high school, and I'm more than 30 years later, I still have feelings of wanting to get revenge. And obviously I don't act on them. But is it natural to have those feelings when one has been treated a certain way? Now, serial murder and sexual sadism, certainly in this case, is a revenge kind of killing. It's not just someone who's got a sexual impulse that's out of control. It's that, and it's a revenge kind of killing. And the objective absolutely is physical violence, although there are other objectives as well. It is a response, a reaction to provocation, although, as I say, much delayed. And so we see, even in an orderly, walled up and walled in, reserved, controlled, rules-based individual, he's given himself over to the dark side, to his own impulsivity, his own destructive fantasies. Is that due to the strength of the fantasies themselves? And there was someone, John Kelly, made a video, he's a criminal profiler. He seemed to be putting everything into that side of things, that it's all because of the fantasies. Take away the fantasies and you take away the crime. That's half of the story, because it's not just about being overcome with fantasies, it's also being programmed to become impulsive. This is a rigid, reserved, locked-in person. And this pornography is teaching him to be impulsive, teaching him to indulge in certain feelings. It's also about instant gratification. And so these patterns of instant gratification then spill over in this locked-in, contrived fantasy world, spill over then into the real world. And that is how he becomes a criminal in reality. It's through this programming, this impulsivity programming, right? In terms of pornography, you're having the magical manifestation of thoughts and ideas, right? And then eventually, because it's an addiction, the next step is to practice this in the real world with real victims. But where did this programming start? Yes, with pornography, but it's pornography that is stimulating impulsivity. So to answer our original question, porn or sadism, which is more to blame? Now, I think a lot of you, including myself, probably would have taken the position of sadism. Have you reconsidered that? Are you starting to feel like you want to change your answer? Because porn is the surprising answer. It's not that sadism is irrelevant. Sadism is a big factor. But I would argue that porn is the bigger factor here. criminal profiler John Kelly touched on the same thing in his recent analysis. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. He said, take the fantasy away and you take the core, you take away the core of the serial killer. But it's not just the porn, it's the programming that is inherent in that leads to impulsivity. And so in sum, it's the pornography that pushes this necrophilic character back into the real world because he has discovered the power of instant gratification. And now he wants to gratify his reactive, compensatory aggression, not hypothetically, but with real people. It's still symbolic, but the symbolism has become very real to the also very real issues he has with his extremely damaged self-esteem. I must also say this. I never, ever see the symbolic infrastructure acknowledged in true crime, not with psychologists, not with criminologists. It's just not with law enforcement, not with lawyers. It's an area that just seems to be completely unknown to law enforcement and prosecutors, and yet it's so central to the criminal psyche. I think we saw a little bit of it in the Chad Bell case, where you could obviously see that what is being suggested was symbolic, someone going dark and someone being a zombie. And yet, even in those symbolic constructs, people were taking it literally. But this symbolic psychology is so integral to all of us, and yet it is never really acknowledged. You never hear conversations about this, which is why Ernest Beck is such a breath of fresh air, because he knows about it and he really deals with it. Another aspect that you won't see or hear acknowledged anywhere is the sadism beyond Heuermann. Billy Baldwin, for example, was in the very same class as Heuermann. Did he ever hurl a sarcastic, unkind, or insulting slur Heuermann's way in the years that they were at school together? Make no mistake, Heuermann isn't the only sadist in the story, and it didn't come from him. It started, the humiliation, the torture, the insults in the classroom, which, if you really want to blame someone else, you shouldn't start with Asa or Victoria. You should start with you and me, with us, with society, with just the people in the classroom, with the teachers who stood by and watched and did nothing. Because that is what he's really a product of. And yes, of course, he's a product of and will have to be held accountable now for himself. He also chose how he was going to respond to all this. He didn't have to turn to pornography. He didn't have to indulge in that side of things. And of course he did. And he is responsible for that. But what about society? Will it be held accountable? Does it even know how to be? I'm not going to take it further than that. I hope you found this analysis powerful. I certainly learned a few things along the way. I hope you guys have as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The next episode, number 9, there'll be one more after that. The next episode deals with intertextualities, where we'll look at some of the same driving forces, certainly the same ideas, sadism, and so on, in other cases, and use these other perspectives to get an even stronger handle on the progress that we've already made. And do you agree we have made significant progress? Have you ever come across a channel that can dive as deep into something like psychology as this one? We are we're certainly more than 10 episodes in just to this one particular subject matter. That is super, super, super deep diving. And I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it certainly is I think that special talent that you'll find on this channel. And that's not bragging. That is simply a fact. That I maybe have weaknesses in certain areas, but this is certainly, as far as I'm concerned, a strength. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.